Great Wednesday. Welcome to the Fully Human Connections podcast. I'm your host, King. I'm joined by my co-host, Reggie. How you doing today, Reggie?
Doing well, King. A little bit under the weather with some fatigue, but otherwise I'm doing okay.
Excellent. Well, not excellent that you're not under the weather a little bit, but excellent that you're feeling okay. And I'm glad and grateful that you joined the show today. Had enough strength and well enough to get on the show because it's an important show. And before we really get into our topic today, let's go to our usual greetings or our morning routine, so to speak, and talk about what we're grateful for and as well. But let me first start by asking, kind of, what's your spiritual energy number today? What do you feel?
Yeah, it's 10. My physical energy is not a 10, but my spiritual energy definitely is, and that helps. In fact, um, my ability to navigate whatever fatigue and achiness I feel right now.
Okay. Well, I join you at 10 as well. Again, just to be clear to the listeners, we're not saying 10 as meaning that your physical energy is always at a 10, that you're always, you know, astute and everything, but it's more about your spiritual energy, meaning what your presence feels like in the universe right now at this moment. And again, your mental energy physical energy can change throughout the day, but the overall spiritual energy is a combination of those, plus just how do you feel being connected and aligned with your purpose in the world. To me, all that goes into that, and I think once I'm actually on the same frequency as God or as the universe, as love, as I like to see it, then I'm always going to be at a 10 because I feel the energy of what that feels like, and tapping into my purpose, and then being aligned with that, and connected to that, and working towards that. And as long as I am, I can never be feeling less than a 10 in that kind of frequency. I believe that's how I want to say it. So I just kind of want to add a little more depth to that question because a lot of times I ask people, and I know people use when they talk about energy, they're used to talking about just physical energy or maybe even mental energy, because those are the two areas that most people focus on and we talk about. But I just want to make sure people understood the context of what I meant when I say spiritual energy level, encompassing kind of all three. So with that being said, I go into why don't you go first and say what are you grateful for?
Yeah, so I'm grateful as always for my indoor plumbing, for the refrigerator downstairs that has some mostly fresh food in it, um, and more specifically and recently or immediately, I'm grateful for the ability to rest when I need to rest because I've needed to rest the last 48 hours or so, and it sounds like a little bit of hyperbole, but just if there's a bed I can go lay down in for take a 20-minute nap or go to bed early without worrying about other things falling apart is a benefit, I would say, that a lot of people on the planet, even in this country, don't have because of sometimes because of their age. They're young and they wouldn't want to do that anyway, but because they have to keep working. And so I just feel uh, gratitude for the ability to rest where I need to rest.
You're right, that's extremely important, and I can absolutely attest to not being able to rest when I want to rest, or definitely rest in the manner in which I want to rest. And I think that so being grateful and recognizing that is definitely something I can relate to in alignment with. And one of my other things I'm grateful for this morning is my health, my ability to see, hear, walk, talk, stand, breathe, and have sound mind. I'm grateful for another 24 hours to pursue my purpose in life. Let's talk about that. And being alive to that is so important. Grateful for a mother who's alive, still has love, energy, and I still can interact with her, and blessed, like I said, that she has sound mind because I've talked to other folks who have gone through that situation currently or gone through that situation previously, and they've had other things like adding disease to it, cancer, and dementia, and things of that nature, and not even being a person that not even being in control of their bodily fluids. So when you compound all that to taking care of someone else, I'm definitely grateful that my mom doesn't have those extra I would say issues with her. So that's a blessing. And I just want to say this too in relation to being grateful that I'm grateful to be able to still. I say this because I'm more not to boast, but to say more of a commitment to myself and being grateful for being honest to myself. Is I'm up to now 86 push-ups, and again, one more each day. And I can definitely tell it's harder. I've done it before, but it's definitely harder the second time around. I've never been this age, I should say, and I know that has a lot to do with it. And then plus, I'm doing it at the end of my day, and telling myself I need to get up and do them in the morning, so I don't get enough sleep. I just want to get up and actually do it. But I believe that'd be better. But anyway, doing it at the end of the night, staying committed to that, and just seeing the growth is something that I'm grateful for, to be able to have the physical ability to do it, but just able to experience this part of where I am in my life and still say I'm going to have that control over my life as much as I can at this stage. Particularly seeing how my mom is needing care and just where she was 5 years ago, and how 5 years can really make a huge difference in your life, where you can't even fathom how different life can be in 5 years. So just being grateful to be able to recognize that and have the wisdom to understand that and prepare for that.
Amen.
All right. With that being said, had a lot of introduction there, had a lot, just in a space with a lot of energy, a lot of thoughts about things. So with that being said, why don't you go ahead and get us into our topics going to be today?
Yeah. So last night, September 10th, 2024, was the first and maybe the only, we don't know yet for sure, presidential debate between Kamala Harris and Donald Trump. And there are plenty of people in all the major media outlets, print and broadcast and streaming, that have a lot to say about the debate. They like to say who won, who lost, what happened, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And what we're talking about, we are going to talk about the debate, but we're going to talk about it in a specific context, which is in the context of what we've been doing for the last 2.5 years, speaking about the book Healing America's Narratives, subtitled The Feminine, the Masculine, and Our Collective National Shadow. So the context within which I'd like to introduce or initiate the conversation is just remembering what the 9 elements of the collective national shadow are, as I identify them in the book. And they are ignorance, arrogance, fear, bigotry, violence, greed, excess, bullying, and untrustworthiness. And the collective shadow of the nation, which includes all 9 of those traits, not all 9 of them in every moment, but 9 of them in different variations, manifests through an unhealthy iteration of masculine energy in the absence of healthy feminine energy. Now, we're not going to unpack all of that language today because we've been unpacking it for 2.5 years. But in the debate last night, and I say this knowing that people tuned into the debate, those who did tune in, some who have an immense dislike for Harris and they like Trump. Some have an immense dislike for Trump and like Harris. Beyond the 2 individuals, some hate liberals and think Harris is a liberal. Some hate conservatives and think Trump is a conservative. And then there are other people tuned in, perhaps not sure which of the candidates they will vote for yet. And so they tuned in with a level of curiosity, perhaps, and a different kind of scrutiny, other than cheering for the candidate that they want and predisposed to dislike the other candidate. So I recognize all of that as being true, that the way I went into it isn't the way everybody went into it. And I'm not saying I'm right. But in the book, um, which is 12 chapters long. There's one chapter that points to Donald Trump, both his pre-2016 behavior. I've known who he is since the late 70s, early 80s, because I grew up in the greater New York City area. And he's 8 years older than I am, I think. But Donald Trump embodies all 9 traits. He embodies ignorance, arrogance, fear, bigotry, violence, greed, excess, bullying, and untrustworthiness. And last night, just to kind of kick us off here, he showed up with most of those. He wasn't, immediately violent in terms of behavior. He didn't hit anybody or threaten anybody, but he showed ignorance. He showed arrogance. He exhibited fear. He exhibited bullying. He exhibited, untrustworthiness, because a number of verifiable lies that he told are pretty clear. And for me, the debate brought nothing new to the national conversation. It wasn't really a debate. It was question and answer back and forth, which is typical for American presidential campaigns. We don't really have debates per se, but moderators ask questions and you can respond, and then you can respond to the other person, which is not really a debate.
Right.
So just to be clear, I didn't learn anything new about either candidate, except that Kamala Harris owns a gun. I learned that. But, Donald Trump was consistent in terms of how he's been. He still claimed that he won the 2020 election, despite every Republican, independent, and Democratic Secretary of State and electoral administration in every county around the country making it clear that he lost by almost 8 million popular votes. He still claims that he won, and he disclaimed any responsibility for the January 6th riot. He said he didn't do that. It was actually the mayor of Washington, D.C. and Nancy Pelosi's fault that there was a riot. So if anything, because just so we're clear, I don't want him to be president again. I'm really clear on that. It's not a surprise. If anything, I was surprised that he didn't try to be more measured. He went off and talking about Springfield, Ohio, and Aurora, Colorado, and the fact that immigrants are overrunning these 2 cities, and they're eating the local people's dogs and cats. And he repeated that. And he was more unhinged than I thought he would be, especially in that particular venue, a presidential debate, which is a good thing for anybody who's actually undecided and reasonably competent and rational in their thoughts. There's a pretty clear choice if you really want a democracy. And he praised Viktor Orban, the authoritarian leader of Hungary, and continued to praise, basically saying grandiose things that had he still been president, Putin would never have invaded Ukraine, and what happened, like Hamas would never have attacked Israel on October 7th of last year. So it's this grandiosity, which his supporters still believe. And I thought Kamala Harris, was a little bit stilted in moments, but for the most part, she, held her own, because he's a difficult man to be on a stage with, as we've seen in other debates going back to 2016, because he tells so many lies. It's hard to refute what he's saying. If you tell one lie, you can kind of refute that. But if everything coming out of his mouth is grandiose and as she said a couple times, extreme, that immigrants are eating the dogs and cats in cities across America, it's kind of tough to really have a rational response to that. So more concisely, there were no surprises in that debate. I'm amazed that all of the print and broadcast and media folks on both sides of the political aisle who have so much to say about it. Because Kamala Harris, I thought, showed up as she has shown up in her career. And Donald Trump showed up as he has shown up since he got into the political scene in 2016. That's, again, I recognize that's just my take on it. I don't pretend to speak to anybody for anybody except myself. So I hand it off to you.
Well, again, thank you for the wonderful topic. Like you, I got a chance to watch the debate. I didn't get a chance to watch all of it. I watched some of it last night. Most of it I was driving, so I actually had to just listen to it. Couldn't really watch it. I got the last maybe 20 minutes I was able to watch and see the impact of the split screen.
Hmm.
So I would say I differ from you in a little bit that I came away with. I think I learned a lot from the debate. I got a lot more. I would say I have a lot more respect for Kamala than I had going into it.
Mm-hmm.
But like you, she definitely came, prepared. And Trump again showed that, I don't think he was as prepared. I think, and again, I as an engineer, I was gonna go to the root cause. I think Trump definitely taps into the energy of white privilege. In the context, I don't have to get as prepared as I need to. I don't have to take this challenge as serious as I need it because of I have my base that's going to vote for me regardless of whatever I say or whatever I do. So they're locked down, and I'm a white man and that's a black woman, and that's just how it is. I believe that's a lot that has to go into his thinking, whether it's consciously or unconsciously. I believe that those thoughts are there because if you just look at it from a context, and people have said this, and I've done it, and with communication, it's definitely see the difference. Just watch it with the sound down, and you just watch the body language of both people, and take away the fact that you had any kind of bias. If you just remove your bias and said, "I'm gonna just watch these two people interact with the sound down." It's a debate. Know there's a context of a debate, but not having the background to know about either party. You just watching it clear with the sound down, and you watch the energy and the body language. You can see that one person was properly prepared, another person wasn't. And the split screen really just showed the contrast that Kamala came in and like she was prepared for all that. Like, okay, well, when I'm not speaking and the camera's on me, this is how I'm going to respond to his statements, and that's how I'm going to look when he says things. You can tell that was rehearsed, and that wasn't just in the moment. Like all that to me went into her preparation. Then this format for me was the best format for her since she's been a candidate, as opposed to just watching her speak at rallies. Because I've grown to the point where I don't really even hear what most candidates are saying at campaign rallies and all that, because it's just talk. It's something that people who like their base and support, they rah. But when you say you're going to do things like radical things that no one has done before, like I'm going to build 3 million new houses, I'm going to come up and put a cap on rising, so companies can't take advantage during academic pandemics and things. You realize, well, you need Congress to pass that. So you would like to get that done, but more than likely you're not going to get that done. So to listen to that and get excited about it is like, but watching her debate and knowing that she has a prosecutory background, she knows how to, and she's felt comfortable. To your point, Donald Trump has the ability to throw you off because he doesn't play by convention. Like most politicians, they play by a certain rule they all operate from. And so when you're debating someone and you're in that context, you're used to those rules and used to that decorum. So that's not comfort filled. You may be a little nervous, but you're not out of sort. Where when Trump is sitting there against you, you're out of sort because he can say whatever, and he's gonna show his white privilege. He's gonna really come and take a lot of presence, takes a lot of space, with just his energy and everything. Last night he couldn't do that. He can do that for a variety of reasons. Because again, he's dealing with someone who prepared for that, not just try to come in with here's what my issues are, here's my platform, here's what you're against. More of I'm going to present myself, my energy, my aura, my being totally different than yours. And she did that. And it's a huge contrast. And then you look at Trump's responses to some of the things she was saying, like crowd sizes. You talked about Springfield. See, that to me reminds me of this Geico commercial where I know there's a lot of Geico commercials, but it's one in particular where it's this mob and they're looking for Frankenstein. They bring all this energy. They're walking down the street and they come across this couple and they're like, you're the monster. Turns around and the guy says, he's with a woman. Oh, I'm not Frankenstein. I'm Trevor. As the woman says, he's Trevor. He's not Frankenstein. Frankenstein is are the monsters in the castle way down the road, right? And the mom says, "Oh, I apologize." They shifted the energy towards that. And it was like, so it didn't really matter. And that's how Trump, to me, Trump's supporters go. It's like, no matter what Trump does, they're going to just roll with him anyway. They're just like a mob that's willing to just accept and roll. So no matter how bad he looks, the fact that he can just come out and say that Haitian immigrants are eating cats and then say, well, I saw it on TV. I saw it on TV as his reference point. See, the arrogance and the ability I can just do that, the comfort level is just unfathomable. You can be the president or you can be anywhere that's going to have cameras on you and can potentially be held accountable. And your response is something that idiotic. I saw it on TV. So that to me, just that was more stark. And then lastly, I just want to say this. It's really gotten to the point now, if you're still voting for Trump and you keep trying to defend it as issues that you're afraid of, he would have a better economy and the world will be run better under him because you trying to say it. I really don't believe that anymore. I respect more people that just come out and say it. Like Laura Ingraham said, when she told Vivek, uh, I'm not going to vote for you because you're Indian. Now that was offensive, but it was real. It was like I can respect the fact she didn't play with that. She just told him straight up. He had to just deal with what that felt like, not saying, well, because you say this, because you say that, and I disagree with you here. No, it's clear cut. You're an Indian. There's nothing you can say that's going to change my voting perspective because I'm biased against you. You can disagree with her bias, not, but it's there and it's real. And I can say I can respect that honesty, that level of just being frank. And that's what's missing nowadays. It's like, if you still say I vote for Trump for any other reason than I want to maintain current white privilege and white supremacy, because what else is he offering other than that? Like I say, he's not even trying to give you a true alternative that you can look at and say, if I was really concerned about being conservative and I was really adamant about, you know, stopping abortion rights or uh, making sure that the government doesn't, less government, he was really advocating about those. You couldn't sit and say this particular time I'm gonna still vote for Trump because you don't see that. You don't feel that he's not saying that. You know what I'm saying? So that can't be your reasons behind why you will still support Trump. And again, it's obviously some black folks that still do that as well, who are voting for Trump. And I've heard them say Trump if he won this debate. So it's like for those who watch that debate and say Trump won or brought anything to the debate that was worthy of giving him any kind of praise, you're never going to be able to have a conversation with that person where I'm going with this. There's nothing we would ever be able to agree with fundamentally. And now I got to question whether or not I should have any kind of dealings with anybody who still feels that way. And it's not because they're a conservative Republican. I got friends of mine who are conservative Republicans, and we can disagree policy wise, but fundamentally we don't agree. We agree about humanity. We agree that we want America to be a great country. We agree that we want democracy. We agree with those things, uh, but we don't have to disagree. But we're not fundamentally against the fact that we would support a cult and give leadership to a man who doesn't care about us at all. He cares about himself and his own agenda. And then believe anything out of his mouth. Like, is your point? It's like Trump realized that the strategy nowadays is to lie all the time so that folks can't tell when you tell them the truth or not. They just believe whatever you say. And you can be outlandish. And finally, I just want to wrap up and say this. See, when I talk about the white supremacy and white privilege, it goes back to being able to have a woman say that, you know, a young boy blew at whistled at her. It gave her made her feel uncomfortable, and a mom could go kill him, i.e. Emmett Till. You know, nothing is no facts are verified. That's with the Haitian the cats. Like that's that same hypocrisy. I can just say whatever I want.
Hmm.
You know, and not be challenged, not be, oh, what do you mean? You know, where are you getting that from? None of that. It's like, oh, that's all we need to hear is something that goes against, that's in alignment with what our beliefs and our hatred and our bias. If you say something that's in alignment with that, I can care less what it is you're saying. I'm not going to fact check it. I'm going to accept it, and I'm going to react, and I'm going to support it. And that, to me, is what I see from folks who still, to this day, want to vote for Trump.
Yeah. So I want to thank you for that. The last thing you said about the ongoing lies, I want to just follow up with that a little bit, especially when it comes to shadow, and then go back to, you know, what you said about, you know, Trump as a, you know, a wealthy white man and, you know, holding on to the white supremacy issue or myth. So first, the lie thing. One of the functions of shadow, as we use it, in other words, shadow simply means that part of myself or an organization or a nation that I or the organization or nation denies about itself. No, it's not me. I don't do that. And then tends to project it onto somebody else. So if I have a problem with anger, but I don't think I'm angry, I think everybody else is angry. If my nation is violent, but we think we don't want to admit it or we don't recognize it in ourselves, we say, no, those nations are the bad nations, not us. And so at least twice, probably it could be 15 times, but I can remember specifically twice last night as Trump was finishing lying about something, he pointed to Kamala Harris and said, that's a lie. Like it was the perfect, he's been doing that in his adult life since he was, you know, since the 80s and 90s. So it's not about being president, but he'll do something and he'll accuse somebody else of doing it. And that's not my opinion.
Right.
And it's not like one, you know, it happened once. That's his MO. That's his way of being in the world. And the number of times when Kamala Harris would say something that was provably true, he would say that's a lie after he had just told a lie about it. So that's one. That's the whole shadow thing. I mean, he is, you know, God bless him, because, you know, he proved me right. You know, he embodies the entire collective shadow in his one musculoskeletal frame. He has all of it. That's one piece. The second piece, which you really addressed this right at the beginning of what you said. So in the book, Healing America's Narratives, there are three what I call foundational subjugations that inform the history of the country. And again, we're speaking about the shadow of the country now. Not, you know, there's been a lot of good things in this country. That you and I are having this conversation is one of them. We have the freedom to do this. But the three foundational subjugations in the founding of the United States are the subjugation of women, the subjugation of indigenous peoples, Native Americans, and the subjugation first of Africans who were kidnapped and enslaved. And then once there was in America, African Americans. And we're not going to go through the whole history of that. It's in the book. It's a lot of historians have written very clearly about it if you're really interested. But what we were faced with, which I think is really important on the split screen last night, was you have the face of the wealthy white landowner for whom the country was founded. That's a bit of an oversimplification, but it's still true. All right, because the local blacksmith and local farmer didn't vote, even if they were white men back in the 1770s, 1780s, 1790s and forward. It took a while for men to get the right to vote if they weren't landowners. So we have this wealthy, by birth wealthy, white guy getting on in years across from or next to a mixed race woman of color. So there again is evidence of the progress the nation has made, but it had the face of the subjugation, the subjugator, and those who had been subjugated. The white guy, and then the woman, and she's also a woman of color. So it was a perfect juxtaposition of the foundational subjugations. The one missing was the indigenous peoples of the North American continent. And indirectly, because Kamala Harris is Jamaican, I mean, indirectly, and this may not be true of every single Jamaican person, but her father, it was, if you're Jamaican, that tends to be a mix of the indigenous peoples of the islands, the European colonizers who came over and often came over with enslaved Africans. So there's that mix of, in the case of Jamaica, British colonizers. I don't know if the people of the Jamaican island were Taino or not. I know that's what the Cubans and Dominicans and Haitians, those islands were Taino. But you have this perfect juxtaposition of the colonizer and those who have been colonized, the subjugator and those who have been subjugated, the white man, wealthy, landowning, and the woman of color who grew up in middle class and made her way in the world. So I don't know to what extent all of the voting people in America, the registered voters, see it that way. It's not the only thing to see, but it's a real clear juxtaposition of American, of the history of the country right up there running for president right now. Woman versus man, white versus color. And there are many white people I know, some in my own family, extended family, who are terrified that the country isn't going to stay white enough for them. And they have to navigate that. And they navigate it through fear, through myth, through anger, and through supporting people like Donald Trump, which is sad and scary. And then the last thing I'll say is Donald Trump is not the problem. He is a problem. And you and I have discussed this in the past, but he is a symptom of an America that would want him to be president a second time. There are tens of millions of Americans who think he's a good idea. That's what the country has to grapple with. And that's a major issue, because whether Kamala Harris loses, wins by a landslide, or wins in a close race, Donald Trump and his supporters are going to say that it was stolen. If they win, they'll say they won by more than they actually did. If they lose, they'll say they won, but it was stolen. So they have created this story of the only way we can lose is if the system is rigged against us, because we're this minority fighting against these bad people. And they actually are a minority. They don't, most people in this country aren't supporters of Donald Trump. And, but that's, will there be violence if he loses? Will there, who knows? But he's no longer an incumbent president. So the peaceful transfer of power, and here's the important piece. If Trump were to win, Joe Biden would peacefully transfer power to him, as Barack Obama did, and as virtually every president has done since American history began. If Kamala Harris wins, of course, it's going to be a peaceful transfer of power, because the current vice president is going to move into the Oval Office as the president. But it's the game, the make-believe magical thinking. The only way we can lose is if they steal it from us. They're not really in touch with reality or the country at large. They're just in touch with a very slim version of the country. Uh, that's frightening to Americans who really believe in democracy. So I've said a lot there. I'll put a pin in it and shut up.
Well, like I said, it's gotten to the point where I don't really expect folks in Trump's camp. Again, I want to be specific. I see there's conservative Republicans and then there's Trump folks. And I look at Trump folks being different from those. They just happen to vote for Trump, what they have in common. Uh, but I might say that's for folks who traditionally have conservative views. But with that being said, it's like I was talking to a friend of mine yesterday who happens to be black before the debate. And I was joking with him that I was going to have a debate party. And I was asking him if he was going to come by and watch my debate party. He was like, you know, I'm actually, don't want to believe the divine Kamala. You know, she's not black, right? Her father was, I'm explaining the heritage, having an East Indian mother and a Jamaican father. Yeah, but she's not black American. And he's saying these sound bites from like Fox News. And I'm like, I asked him, so what does that mean?
Hmm.
That was, where you going with that? I don't understand. Instead of me trying to debate him on whether she's black or not, it's just, what do you mean she's not black? Well, I'm just saying, Jamaicans are not black. That's what he's trying to say. And oddly enough, I should say oddly enough, interesting enough, I work with a Jamaican. So I was able to ask, and I knew, I've been in Jamaica, so I know how much most of the Jamaicans I've met, how they think and who they identify with. And of course, he said they identify with black, but for him to say that, as it had some kind of reason behind it. So that's why I said, when it comes to critical thinking, I think in this world nowadays, to put people, to give the person's bringing negative energy to you, or these crazy talking points, pause, is don't debate them. Just simply ask them, what do you mean but with the statement you
Yeah.
made? And I think most of the times they won't be able to explain it. Like for him to say, well, she's not black, and as his reasons to sit and say that, well, that's because that just means she's dishonest. He didn't say that, but he's trying to allude that that's her dishonesty, where you don't even have to do that far reaching to see the dishonesty in Trump. So it's not like you have a moral high ground here with this candidate. Like, okay, well, he has a moral high ground because she's not even black when they trying to make her be black, and at least Trump is this. You can't even contrast that. It's like he's, to your point, all nine shadow elements. He's, like I said, if you had to look up a image, if you ask AI to say what's the image of white supremacy, it would have to be Trump's picture. Because again, he doesn't go to jail, even though we have these laws and systems in place. For some or another, I was watching this attorney yesterday trying to defend the system by saying, "Well, it just takes time. We know it looks like he gets away." And it's like, if Trump was anything other than a white man, he would have been in jail. Everyone knows that. He'd have been locked away long ago. He wouldn't have been an issue. The only reason he's still relevant and even able to run for president is clear because of that. That's the only reason. And that's where I would like to see that real discourse come from, that we can really debate that, because until it does, and we keep pretending that it's something else, pretending that he has these great values or this great economic policy. Trump owned people. I mean, I've never seen it in my lifetime or even read. I'm into history, but I wouldn't say I'm as much of a scholar as you are. But I'm sure you can never point to a time in history where a Democratic candidate or any candidate for president had so many past or former party people switch over to vote for them and then endorse that candidate. Dick Cheney is endorsing Kamala Harris. It's like have all these Republicans that are, didn't change their political views, just saying I'm not going to vote for this person. He represents my party. I'm not even going to vote for him this election. And not only am I going to vote for him, but I'm going to endorse the opponent. I've never seen that. So to me, any rational thinking conservative who can't see that there's something there, that this is unprecedented as far as what we're seeing, uh, with, as relates to this election, it's scary to believe that folks still going to ride with that. Like, I don't either. A, you don't believe he's going to do the things he says in Project 25, or B, you support it. Now, if you don't believe it, then that just means you're naive and you're dangerous. And to me, that's why I say you shouldn't vote, because you don't have the capacity to really understand the power behind your vote if you can sit here and say, I don't care what he's going to do with Project 2025 because he's not, because she's not black. You know, and you're going to come at me with, well, she locked up. I had one other person I was having a conversation with that's the black person. They were saying, well, you know, she locked up a lot of black men in San Francisco. And I'm like, well, she was a prosecutor. You know, that's her job. I mean, you make it seem like she was a superintendent and she locked up black people. I mean, so in a city, if folks are doing crime, disproportionately going to be black in a major city, then they'll get locked up, and that's who's going to come across her docket to be prosecuted. It's going to be majority black people because of how the system, the criminal justice system is. That's just a reality. Every Baltimore's prosecutor is Marilyn Mosby said that same thing. That she saw, that's who came across her desk majority of the time. So to hold her accountable for that is crazy. But those are just sound bites that people have now to defend their position. They have to try to use those crazy talking points. And finally, I think it was it was a tweet that Trump put on Truth Justice or Truth Social, or maybe it was something he said verbally. But he said that what was happening, and don't quote, I'm trying to quote, I'm summarizing. He said there was transgender, I think it was in some city or some state, transgender immigrant prisoners were having, Kamala wants to support transgender immigrant prisoners having sex change operations in prison. You know, so it's like you put together 8 or 9 different Republican talking points into one thing. So that now that's good. I mean, so that's my point is, when you have that mob behind you who don't really care, you can say, well, no, the monster's that way, and they're going to just go that directly to that way with the monsters. Doesn't care. We're just with you. That's the point I'm getting at.
Yeah, I mean that most recent one with regard to the prisoners, but also that there are public schools where the parents send their daughters and sons to school in the morning and they undergo that's a quote, brutal operations, and come home with their sex changed in the school system. But they get a sex change in the school. So he has said that out loud. Now, God help us if there are actual American voters who believe that. But there's a really important quote that, because we could spend days together taking ridiculous quotes that he has said that are provably false for any reasonable person, and it's a waste of time to do that because there are so many of them. But back in 2016, before the election, when Steve Bannon, the Breitbart news guy, who's currently in jail, finally serving his, I think, contempt of Congress was what he was convicted of by refusing to appear before Congress. But he basically said the Democrats aren't the enemy. The enemy is the media. And then this is a direct quote. What we have to do is flood the zone with shit. So meaning the zone, meaning the media space. And that's exactly what they've done. They're extraordinarily good at that. They say so many ridiculous things every day. And they've been doing it for more than 8 years now, about 8 years, that they have flooded the zone with shit. And if you read about the people who lived through the propaganda of the Cold War, the USSR and the United States, and some of the Soviet dissidents who came to this country. And both political parties, spin things and put misinformation out there. They've been doing that for decades, even before the internet. But at a certain level, and I forget who said this, it was one of the Russian dissidents. He said it's not so much that they're putting out false statements, but they're putting out so much of it so quickly and so often that you get cognitively exhausted, and it's hard to, after a while, it's hard to tell what's true and what's false anymore. And that's true in this country. The information, the ecology of information is completely contaminated. To find out what's true, you have to really do some work on your own. You can't just trust one person or one source. And that's the Trump Republican strategy for 8 years now has been to do that, and they're very good at it. Again, it's the difference, and I'm not in favor of misinformation, kind of spinning things so it's not quite true, but it's not really a lie. I want people just to tell the truth. But the way it's done now, and even with other countries who have a vested interest in who wins or loses, the Justice Department is working overtime right now, chasing down all of the fake identities on social media. It's exhausting. And especially for a nation that doesn't, many places, they don't read books anymore. They don't have a good attention span. We're the perfect nation to be fooled by idiots in many ways. Now, having said that, there are tens of millions of really good people get up every day and try to understand and do a good job. So I don't mean to be, a complete Debbie Downer, as they used to say on Saturday Night Live. But it's dangerous stuff because it is exhausting to really do the work and get through all these different talking heads and commentators, some of whom are acting in good faith and doing their due diligence, and some just repeat party lines. So it's really difficult. And the last thing I want to say is, you mentioned your friend who said that she's not really Black because she's Jamaican and Indian. So that Jamaicans aren't really Black. He should go talk to the members of the Jamaican Olympic team, at least on track and field, and speak to Usain Bolt, who is he's retired now, but who was the fastest man in the world for over a decade. But it's interesting because in India, where people aren't white, no one accuses people of living in India as being white-skinned, but there are shades of brownness and blackness, and there's a caste system based on it. So there's racial discrimination, and there's a caste system in India, and there definitely are people of color in Jamaica. So what your friend's perspective is, it just goes right back to that, the real minutia of those boxes of group centrism. In other words, well, she's not really an African American because, indirectly she might have some African blood through Jamaica. More than likely, it's very possible, but we have to know her whole ancestry, and probably not any African blood through her Indian ancestry, but she's still a woman of color. And we get stuck in those little places, like it used to be when I was growing up. Because of recent immigration, the Poles, the Italians, the Irish, the Germans, and like it was better to be one or the other. And they were all being treated badly by those who had come before them, but they had to claw their way for their own recognition. That stuff is endless, and that's why in our conversations, well, maybe we're all human. Why don't we start there, boys and girls, and not deny? I think most people who listen to you and me or watch us, it's pretty clear that our skin pigmentations are different, right? But we kind of I don't hold that against you. I don't think you hold it against me. But we're able to, we identify as human beings who are aligned and in attunement across many values and viewpoints. We probably don't, we don't agree on every single thing, but enough that we trust each other for the most important things. But there are still people stuck in there. Well, she's not really a Black American. Yeah. Okay. Good. Vote for the white supremacists then. Good luck.
Right, right. Well, see, I'm sorry. When you finish,
Yeah. I should have been finished 2 minutes ago.
to summarize, I would like to quote, but I'm not going to be able to quote him exactly. But to summarize what the great historian and the founder of Black History Month, first Black History Week, then Black History Month, Carter G. Woodson said, "When you control the mind of a slave, you don't have to tell the slave do not come in the front door. They will know their place and go to the back door automatically. And if there's not a back door, they will create one because they realize they've been subjugated." And so that's what I see with Black Trump supporters. It's like your cognitive dissonance is so much in front because you're saying things that is totally antithetical to your identity. And, I mean, again, now Trump hasn't come out and said anything that's glaringly racist toward black people. Like, I don't like black people. He's never made those statements. And because he hasn't, his behaviors has. The people he aligned himself with has. A lot of his policies definitely will. You discount all that because he's never said that.
Hmm.
And like, now of course you can point to him and his father not renting to blacks and him being sued and losing that court case. But see, a lot of blacks will say, well, they don't rent to blacks either, so that didn't bother them in that context. It's not black middle class people who didn't rent to, it's black poor people. Most people don't want to rent to black poor people, so that's not as a big overstep in their minds. That's what I'm going with that. So you gotta look at really, to your point, at the end of the day, that's why I say it's so important now for me, that is, to only want to be in conversations with people who see themselves, who identify as human beings. Because all this other identity you're choosing, whether it's your race, whether it's your gender, whether it's your political party, whether it's your career, you know, whether it's your ethnicity, if that's where your identity is, I'm not going to be able to have a very long these value conversation with you, in my mind, among deep subjects. Some of this really matters. I mean, we can have transactions, obviously, we can exchange goods, services, but to really engage in something that I believe will be a value added conversation and for me to want to consider to add a person to my circle of my tribe that I'm building, I'm just not interested in the stage. The older you get, the more you realize the importance of time. You don't really realize the importance of time in your youth because obviously you believe you have unlimited time. You see an elderly person and you say that's as far off as Pluto is from here to Earth. So that's not even something I need to be concerned myself with. But when you start to get to the 40s and the 50s and you begin to see how society treats you differently and you look at other people who are half your age and you realize that now you're no longer youthful. You're not considered youth anymore. That's the new youth, and they have a whole different thinking and a different mindset. Then you begin to really start to say, again, to me, if you're maturing normally, Carl Young talks about the maturity continuum that you have in your life, if you're going through those phases, then you look to have less hate in your life. You realize there's no value in having hate, and you don't no longer true. You shouldn't believe the narratives you've been taught all your life. Like the narratives. I believe that everything about my identity, because when you choose to say I'm a black man, what you're putting on with that choice is all the weight and all the biases that this country has placed upon just that image. So now that I've chosen that identity, I got to operate from that identity. And
Hmm.
that's my primary identity. And that's going to bring in everything bias. And you can't see someone else as a human being if you do.
Yeah.
But you're going to see them only through, I want to be with my tribe, and here's what's happening to my tribe, or has happened to my tribe, and everything is about what has happened to the tribe as opposed to you as an individual. And you look at what in your life have you done as an individual, as a human being, what's been done to you, what have you experienced. It's not going to be the totality of that racial identity or that political identity or that gender identity. It's going to have some elements, absolutely, but it's also going to have some joy, some greatness, some thing to be grateful for as well, and that is the humanity of it. You know, we talk a lot about healing America's narratives, and she's doing your book, and very well should. But I still look at America as a country that, even though there's been a huge racist component to it, historical, violent, in the way that it has done, but it also has had its magical moments. I mean, I still can remember growing up as a youth and not having much. Again, I was in poverty, but we were surviving, but still had great times, and still was able to have family and have these magnificent uh, cultural parties and expressions and form who I am as an individual. Those accumulation of those experiences, and that happened here in America. So again, like I said, if you begin to focus on being a human, you can look and say there's evil, there's bad things in the world, but at the same time, I can put my mind, my energies, and my efforts toward greater things, more positive, love-filled things, joyful things, and have that kind of a life. I know I went off and took it there. I just kind of wanted to add that to the part because, again, like you, I didn't want to be all doom and gloom, and that's not the purpose of our show. So as we begin to wrap up the show, and we want to move into the section of now, what do you see as ways that we can watch that debate, uh, look at what's happening again with Trump and everything, and still put our minds and our efforts toward being fully human?
Yeah. So what comes up now is, and this is not something that's, for some people, it's actually pretty easy. And I think for others, it's not so easy. But watching the debate, listening to the debate, um, first thing is understand your biases going in. Like I had certain beliefs about both Kamala Harris and Donald Trump based on history and real events over the last, in my case with Trump, I don't know, 40 or more years, 50 years almost. But notice, your own biases going in, and then listen to what they say, each of them. And this is the thing that a lot of people won't do. The media does it to a certain extent, but fact check it. In other words, is what he just said true? Is what she just said true? How can I find out? Check some major news sources. See how they align with each other. Or they're all saying the same thing. And if you do that enough, you can gradually get to the truth. Are immigrants really overrunning towns in the Midwest and eating dogs and cats? City manager of Springfield, Ohio said, no, they're not. But Donald Trump said he heard it on TV. So just, look for the truth behind it. And then the second piece, I'll just make this one really quick, is decide what kind of nation you want to live in. And is it, which of the candidates speaks more to that kind of nation? Listen to everything that Donald Trump has said over the years. Listen to everything you can find that Kamala Harris has said over the years, and decide which one of these two people has the best chance of leading this nation in the direction of the nation you would like to live in. Understanding, and this is the last part, that the president doesn't control the country. Can do certain things as president, but there's a Congress and there's a court system headed, at the top of that is the Supreme Court, but there's a whole federal court system and then state and local courts. And it's really clear that no one person, I don't care who it is, Kamala Harris, Donald Trump, King, Reggie, is going to change all the problems that we face in this country or in this on this planet right now. I mean, just to go back, Mitch McConnell said after Barack Obama was elected, Mitch McConnell was the leader of the Senate. At first he was the Republican minority leader. Then they got the majority in 2010. And he said the primary purpose of this body, meaning the Republican caucus in the United States Senate, is to make sure this is a one-term president. So he put all of his efforts, when they're supposed to be governing on behalf of the country, to trying to keep Barack Obama from a second term. That's what the U.S. Senate chose to do. So the president isn't in charge. In one way, he or she is, but there's a lot of push and pull, and you better understand how the government works because there's a lot more going on than just the Oval Office. So recognize that. I'll shut up now.
Well, no, definitely appreciate that. Absolutely. This has been an enjoyable conversation as we continue to keep building. Hopefully, people understand that what we're advocating for here is, even though politically we both say we're in support of Kamala, mainly because Trump is just so much pain, I would say negative. Like, you can just see the energy. It's like, why would you want to listen to a person say, I'm going to support the person that says, our country is broken, our country is sick, our country has all these problems, and we're heading off the pit, and we're going to hell, and only I can correct that. Excuse me. Compared to a person saying that our country has the potential, we're doing great, and we can do greater things. And why would you not be at least attracted to that message? To me, if you're not, now we can get into whether you believe her or not, whether or not she has a great positive, what's her progressive record, what's her policies, but just off the energy source of which one is more in alignment with your soul, the frequency you're vibrating at, is to me key. So thank you for pointing out our next steps. So as we wrap up our show, we always like to end it with giving an example of someone who we believe has exhibited or currently exhibiting these fully human behavior characteristics. And I think that's such an important part of our show because we want to make sure we're not just telling people to be something that no one is, or some kind of false ideal of this person or image behavior traits in our minds. And so with that being said, the person I want to highlight this month or this week, I would say, and I've said her name before, but I recently got a chance to see an interview, her being interviewed just last night, as a matter of fact. And I thought to myself, yeah, that's just greatness right there. And we don't have people like that as much anymore. And that's, again, Jane Fonda. And I watched Jane Fonda be interviewed last night, or a clip of her interview last night with Jimmy Kimmel. And she's 87.
Mm-hmm.
And my mother's 87. I'm watching the contrast, right? This woman comes on stage. She's obviously still functioning. She's walking, still in complete control of her faculties. So looks great for her age. Obviously you can see she has some work done, but who wouldn't? You got the money, why not? I don't judge you for that. But just listen to still her wit, her knowledge of what's going on, her interest still in current affairs and justice and climate change. She's advocating for that. And Jimmy's trying to make jokes because, of course, he wants to keep the show entertaining and, throw his little joke in. And she's standing forth. Let me make my point about climate change, and just seeing that kind of fervor and they still has that passion at that age. And like I said, somebody who, that's what I see as a fully human being, and that you can only hope for. And she said something that was really, I'm trying to remember this quote, but I thought it was so profound. She said a statement of, I don't know if you probably heard it before, but it was just really resonated with me really well last night when she said something about the age thing, like when, I'm forgetting it. My apologies. Maybe I'll come up with that after you say it, but it was some allude to the fact that when you're young, you have every. I have to watch it again. Go ahead. So,
Yeah. So yeah, thank you. I admire her as well, and um, but I'm going to go with somebody I think I have mentioned before, and he was no longer with us. He died, I believe, in January of 2022, and he was in his 90s. But Thich Nhat Hanh, who was a Vietnamese Buddhist monk, he was also a Fulbright scholar, came to this country late 50s or early 60s, and had the unique position of protesting against the Vietnam War, all sides. So he protested against North Vietnam, he protested against South Vietnam, and he protested against the United States involvement in it. In other words, he was against war, not against one side or the other. And for that, he was not allowed to return to Vietnam for well over 40 years. He was able finally to move back there, and he died in the monastery where he had first trained as a 16-year-old. But what he did in the meantime, published over 30 books, ran retreats around the world, including in the United States, especially but not only for Vietnam vets and their families. I attended one of his week-long retreats back in 98 or 99. And just was a proponent for and of peace. He was connected to he lived in a world that he's about all that is, but he could still come and be with one person who was suffering. So he was, for me, an exemplar of what's possible for human beings. So Thich Nhat Hanh.
all right, appreciate that. Again, each people you are naming, folks have to go research so I can get a better understanding. But each person that you've listed before, I've never felt a time wasted by researching and getting a chance to learn
Good.
about their lives and their careers. So it's always been beneficial and valuable to me. So again, Reggie, thank you again for a wonderful show. Thank you for choosing the topic, being present, caring to write the book, and still being a person who believes in being fully human. And I appreciate this experience that this journey you and I are on as well. And for our listening audience, thank you all for listening to this show. Until next Wednesday at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, let's all continue to strive to be fully human. Thank you.